The lights went out 3 seconds before the first attacker stepped through the vent above us, and I already knew this was not a power failure. My name is Callum Hart, and I was standing in a dark corridor beneath a summit hall, guarding a woman who was about to sign a peace deal that a lot of powerful people wanted dead. Her name was Ambassador Grace Whitmore, and she was young, sharp, and completely unaware that the 10 warriors guarding her had just dropped to the floor without making a sound. I heard them fall before I saw them. A soft thud, then another, then 8 more, like a row of dominoes made of muscle and armor. These were Vorinthi soldiers, 7 feet tall, bred for war since birth, and they had gone down in under 4 seconds without a single shot fired. Something in the air had hit them, something tuned to their nervous system, and it had missed me completely. I did not have time to wonder why. Grace grabbed my arm in the dark. Her voice was steady, but I could feel her fingers shaking. "Callum, what is happening?" "Stay behind me," I said. "Do not stop moving." 3 weeks earlier, nobody on this ship would have trusted me to say those words. I was the only human on an 11-person security detail, surrounded by soldiers whose homeworld had been fighting wars since before humans learned to write. They called me the assistant. Not cruelly, just honestly, the way you might describe a chair or a door. I was the one who carried bags and opened doors while real warriors stood guard. I never argued with them. I only waited, because I had learned a long time ago that words do not change anyone's mind. Actions do. Now those same warriors were lying frozen on the floor, fully awake, fully aware, and completely unable to move a single muscle. And the only person standing was the one nobody had bothered to study. A shape moved at the far end of the corridor, low and quiet, wearing a suit built for silence. Then another. Then 5 more behind it. They were not soldiers in uniform. They were shadows trained to disappear, sent by a group called the Ashwood Circle, a syndicate that had spent years quietly removing anyone who tried to bring the border worlds together in peace. I had read about them in briefings. I never expected to meet them in a hallway with the lights dead and my own team paralyzed on the ground. Grace pressed herself against the wall behind me. "They cannot get past all of them," she whispered, meaning the fallen guards. "They already did," I said. "That is why we are still standing here." The first shadow rushed forward, fast and low, aiming to grab Grace by the shoulder and pull her past me. I stepped into the gap before his hand reached her, caught his wrist, and turned my body the way I had learned back on Earth, long before any of this, back when I was just a kid who got into more fights than he should have. He hit the floor hard enough to lose his breath, and I moved past him before he could recover it. The second one swung a baton toward my ribs. I blocked with my forearm, felt the sting travel up to my shoulder, and answered with an elbow that sent him stumbling into the wall. My hands were shaking with adrenaline, not fear, and every part of my body felt sharper than it ever had in my life. Behind me, I heard Drazkul, the Vorinthi squad leader, straining against his own frozen limbs, growling low in his throat, unable to do anything but watch. 3 more shadows came at once, and this time I did not have the luxury of thinking. I grabbed a metal case from the floor, one of the tech kits the engineers had left behind, and swung it into the path of the nearest attacker. It connected with enough force to send him sideways into his partner, and both of them collapsed into a tangle of limbs against the corridor wall. A fourth attacker grabbed my collar from behind. I twisted, drove my elbow back into his stomach, and used the same motion to pull him off balance and into the ground. My lungs were burning. My knuckles ached. But something in me refused to slow down, because behind me stood a woman who had done nothing wrong except believe that peace was worth fighting for. The remaining shadows paused. I could see it in the way they held their weapons, the way their eyes moved from their fallen partners to me and back again. They had trained for war machines with claws and armor. They had never trained for someone who bled the same color they did but refused to fall. One of them spoke into a small device on his wrist, his voice sharp and urgent. "He is not on the file. Repeat, he is not on the file. I did not know what that meant yet, but I understood the tone. It was the sound of a plan falling apart. They turned and ran. I stood there for a moment, breathing hard, watching the last of them disappear back into the vent they had come from. Grace stepped out from behind me slowly, her eyes wide, staring at the warriors still frozen on the floor and then back at me. "You are not on their file," she repeated quietly. "What does that mean?" "It means they studied everyone in this building except me," I said. "Nobody thought a human worth studying." The lights flickered back on a moment later, and with them came the sound of alarms finally catching up to what had already happened. Drazkul's limbs unlocked almost as suddenly as they had frozen, and he rose slowly, staring at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Not doubt, not mockery, something closer to respect, though I doubted he would ever use that word out loud. "You stood," he said simply. "Someone had to," I answered. He looked at his fallen squad, then back at me, and for the first time since I had joined this detail, he did not call me the assistant. "Callum," he said, testing the name like it carried weight now. "Next time you stand in front, not behind." I nodded, still catching my breath, still feeling the ache in my arms where I had blocked more strikes than I could count. It was not the kind of victory people write songs about. It was messy, fast, and terrifying, but it was real. 2 days later, the summit resumed in a hall filled with delegates from every border system, all of them aware that an attack had nearly ended the peace talks before they finished. Grace stood at the podium, calm and composed, though I could still see the faint shadow of exhaustion behind her eyes. "The attack that took place 2 nights ago," she said, her voice carrying through the hall, "was meant to end this agreement before it began. It failed, not because of superior weapons or superior numbers, but because of one person who was underestimated by everyone in this room, including me." She did not look at me when she said it, but I felt every eye in the hall turn in my direction anyway. "For years," she continued, "our neighboring systems have measured humanity by outdated reports, built on assumptions that are centuries old. They believed us to be simple, uncoordinated, and easy to overlook. That mistake nearly cost us everything. It will not be repeated." The room stayed quiet for a long moment before the first round of applause broke out, spreading through the delegates like a wave. I stood near the back wall, arms crossed, feeling strange about being the center of attention for something I never wanted credit for. I had not done it to prove a point. I had done it because someone needed protecting, and nobody else was left standing. After the ceremony, Drazkul found me near the exit, his massive frame blocking the doorway the way it used to, when he saw me as nothing more than an extra body to fill a roster. "The others want to know how you learned to move like that," he said. "Against creatures twice your size, without armor, without training from any academy we recognize." "I did not learn it in an academy," I said. "I learned it from every fight I lost before I learned how to win one." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly, the closest thing to a smile his face could manage. "We were wrong about you," he said, "all of us." "You were wrong about all of us," I corrected gently. "Humans have been underestimated for a long time. It is easier to mock what you do not understand than to study it." He did not argue with that. Instead, he extended his arm, an old Vorenthi gesture of respect I had only seen used between warriors of equal standing. I took it without hesitation. The Ashwood Circle never attempted another attack on that summit. Word had already spread through their networks, carried by the same shadows who had run from a hallway they thought would be an easy kill. They had come expecting soldiers in armor and found something they had never accounted for, something without claws, without plating, and without any intention of stepping aside. Grace signed the peace agreement 3 days later, securing a truce between systems that had distrusted each other for generations. She never mentioned my name directly in any official record, but she made sure the story spread quietly through every embassy that had once dismissed humanity as harmless. I did not need my name in a record. I only needed the ones who mattered to understand one simple truth. The next time someone decided to underestimate a human standing quietly in the back of the room, they would remember the hallway where 10 warriors fell and one person did not. They would remember why the shadows ran.